Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for Music Business Common Ground webinar series. My name is Henrik Bick. I'm part of the communications team here at the Music Business Association, here to welcome you to today's webinar. Before we get started, I just have a couple of quick housekeeping notes, some pertaining to today's session and some pertaining to other music biz items. For today's webinar, if you'd like to connect with one another during the session, be sure to use the chat function on your Zoom dashboard and change your settings to everyone so folks can see your messages back and forth. We'll also be doing a Q&A at the end of the presentation today. For that, please use the dedicated Q&A button on your Zoom dashboard so that way our panelists can see the questions that are being asked. And like I said, we will be taking those questions at the end of the session. In Music Biz news, in case you missed it this week, we announced the first keynote speaker that will be featured during Music Biz 2023, happening at the JW Marriott Nashville, May 15th to the 18th. On Tuesday night, May 16th, founder and chairman of Cobalt Music, Willard Adritz, will be joining us for a keynote conversation. This week's announcement also coincided with the launch of our WebEx platform. If you're registered for Music Biz or planning on registering, be sure to access your WebEx platform through the email that you used to register. That'll allow you to build your schedule, network with fellow attendees, and check out all of the different events that are happening around Music Biz 2023 in Nashville. You can look for more announcements pertaining to Music Biz, including the finalist announcements for our 2023 Busy Awards in the coming days. We have plenty more to share with you, and we're very excited to see you all in Nashville in May. musicbiz2023.com or musicbiz.org are the best places for you to find more information on the event and for the announcement this week from the keynote. I'd also like to point out that at this point, the room block at the JW Marriott Nashville is full. We are working on securing additional hotel rooms for the event. Be sure to stay tuned for more details on that as well. But we have a lot to get to today, so I don't want to take up any more time on future events. So as we get started, I want to introduce Music Biz President Portia Sabin, who will be helping to lead today's conversation. Take it away, Portia.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. Welcome to the Music Biz webinar series. I think this is actually the first time I've ever hosted a Music Biz webinar series, which is strange, but Henrik normally does it and he does a wonderful job. So thank you for everything, Henrik. Today's topic is very near and dear to my heart, and I am thrilled to be able to moderate this panel for you guys. So without further ado, let me introduce my fabulous panelists. We have Andrea Gleason, the CEO of TuneCore. We have Matt Yaji, the VP and Head of Research at Luminate, Christine Osazuwa, the Chief Strategy Officer at Shoobs, and we have Alexandra Kay, who is a country singer-songwriter and an artist on TuneCore. Welcome, everybody. Come on in. Might take a second for everyone to pop in. Hi, Alexandra.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So glad to have you. This is great.
Yes.
Very cool. Oh, we've got Andrea with a beautiful background, Christine with beautiful hair.
Hello.
We're going to be delighted by Matt in a moment as well. I'm looking forward to that. So it looks, just a little housekeeping, it looks like people are already figuring this out, but feel free to drop questions in the chat, but there's also a little Q&A function. And if you want to put your question in there, we will get to questions at the end. So without further ado, Andrea, I'm going to ask you to start us off and just talk about why it was important for you guys at TuneCore to sponsor the Be the Change study.
Well, thank you so much to everybody attending. This topic is really near and dear to my heart. So the first time that I saw the low participation of women in the music industry was actually when I first joined TuneCore in 2015. And I was learning a little bit about our artist group. I actually don't come from the music industry. I came from retail. So it was like very fresh, no expectations, no preconceived ideas about what it should or shouldn't be. But it was so striking to me that only 28% of our TuneCore artists were women. And one could argue that if you're in a, if you're at a label, you're an artist where there's a gatekeeper that is kind of making these decisions, okay, maybe you can understand how maybe the underrepresentation of women continue to be caught up. But we're an open platform. If you have $15 a year, you can get your music up on Spotify and be on TuneCore. So it was just really striking, which indicated a larger problem. And ultimately, I think before we get into the real details of the study, because really the goal of the Be the Change study is to get into why this is happening. But before we do that, I think it's really, really good to look at some of the other studies that are out in the market, and there's lots of them, but I think a good one to start with is actually the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, that essentially shows the representation of women, both on the creator and the executive side in the music industry. And so if we can pull up a couple slides that we have, I'd love to walk those through first, because I think it will frame then the data around why this is happening. So if we can go to fast forward 2 slides here real quick. So what the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative that's put on by USC really aims to do is measure the participation of women in the Billboard 100 top charting music. And what you can see here is actually the trend line on that representation over the last 10 plus years. And the good news is that things are headed in the right direction. I was actually really thrilled to see that in 2022, 30% of the Billboard of the music on the Billboard 100 chart were from women, which is headed in the right direction, but not good enough, because the US population is 50% women. So glad we're headed in the right direction, but we've still got 20 more percentage points to go, but good. And I think that, as we uncover the why this is happening, it's going to continue to help us to move these numbers in the right direction. If we can go to the next slide. Essentially, then you start going into more technical roles and the numbers get lower. So what this is showing us is the representation of women as songwriters in the Billboard 100 chart. So it's, this last year it was 14%, the 10-year trend is a little under 13%. So as you get more technical, these numbers reduce. If you can go to the next slide, is the area we have the most opportunity is for producers, which continues to hover around 3% of representation. And if we can go to the next slide, essentially, this is the representation of, artists of color in top charting music. And then essentially here, this is an area we've historically done better, but it shows that we can't sit on our laurels, because this actually reduced last year, and an area we need to continue to monitor. And in the next slide, we're going to go into a little bit of the representation of executives. And this is an area that has a lot of room to grow, where only about 14% of CEO, chairman, and president roles are held by women. Only 4.2 of the individuals in these roles are Black. So this is an area we need to focus on. And the good news is, if we can go to the next slide, is that as you go lower down into the executive, kind of bench, there is higher representation, which is good, but also shows that we need to make deliberate efforts to get more underrepresented groups in the top positions. And that essentially, it takes deliberate work to make sure that we're helping these underrepresented groups continue to stay in the music industry and continue to be considered and be prepared for those top roles. If we can move to the next slide. And this is the last slide I'll share, just as sort of background. For those of you that may not be familiar, is that in the UK, companies that have over 250 employees are legally required to publish their annual gender pay gap stats. And so they have to make these public. And essentially what we're seeing here is that, for the large companies in the music industry in the UK, they're continues to be opportunity to actually pay men and women the same wages for the same role. And it's good to see that at companies like at Spotify and Apple that, you know, the numbers have been continuing to improve and get better. And it does take deliberate work. It's something that we had to do and make some big changes on at TuneCore a couple of years ago, and make sure that you're paying people in the same role of different genders the same exact salaries or in the same bandings. And that's the conclusion of sort of the background. I'm going to pass it over back to Portia.
Before we go on, Andrea, thank you. This is really cool. So it looks like at the 3 majors in the UK, the pay gap actually got worse
Yes.
in the last 2 years. Wow. Okay. That's disheartening.
Disheartening. And this is why ultimately you have to focus on why this is happening, and then really, you know, make those deliberate steps to make things better. And only when you focus on where are we not doing well, can you then, you know, focus on that and actually make the proper steps to make things improved.
Absolutely. So you guys decided we want to put together a study. We want to check out what's going on, you know, get data of our own. So this year you guys partnered with Luminate to conduct that study. And so Matt, I wanted to bring you in to talk about what you guys did and how you actually conducted the research.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a slide that has a lot of detail on it for those of you who want it. So I think the core of this, in wanting to understand why, you have to ask people, right? And an important part of that isn't just representing the lived experience of women, of non-binary folks, of trans folks, but also understanding what the experience of men is, so that you understand what that disparity looks like in action. So we did have a very healthy balance, gender balance of the study, pretty darn close to 50-50. And then you account for non-binary and other gender expansive individuals. We were global this year with the study. We translated it into 13 different languages across kind of the biggest and most widely spoken languages in the largest music markets. The full list is in the report if you're super curious. And so that really enabled us to expand the scope of the study this year. So we had over 1,600 professionals take the survey. That includes folks who are artists, about over a third were artists or creators. It included like group artists, so not just solo artists, folks at labels, at distribution, at the indies, and live music, kind of from all different sectors of the industry. And the total representation on a country basis was over 100 countries in total. So we're really, really proud. One of our core focuses in supporting TuneCore with this study was making sure we had representation from the Global South as well. And in terms of the way that we phrased the questions and the way that we approached designing this year's study, we wanted to take I hate using the term Western, but it's a convenient shorthand in this setting. We didn't want to have a Western value structure being imposed on respondents across the world. So we really tried to remain focused on key actions and experiences of people in the music industry. And so I'm really, really proud of the results that have come out and really spotlighted a lot of areas where we can make a difference. And Andrea is going to talk through some of that shortly.
Absolutely. Thank you. This is really cool. So just, I love to like ask little questions about these slides. So looking at the little map, the green, what's the difference between the green and the white or cream?
The green is where we had respondents for the study.
Oh, cool. 11% from Africa. That seems like a pretty high percentage. You guys did a good job.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. We partnered with a lot of different organizations throughout the global music industry to make sure that we could push this out to folks. I'm assuming TuneCore will be doing the study again next year. So if it's something you want to have your feedback heard in, keep your eyes and ears open for that in the latter half of this year for next year's study, because we want to make sure everyone's voice is represented and heard.
Fantastic. All right, so now the fun part. Andrea, do you want to tell us what the results were? What are the takeaways?
Absolutely, my favorite part. So essentially, we wanted to ask the question around a couple key areas. Number one, we started with discrimination. So all the respondents were asked what types of discrimination they were seeing, and what you can see is that obviously there's various kinds of discrimination that is happening across the music industry, but gender continues to be the highest at 57%, with race and ethnicity being second, age being third, and so on and so forth. So this really kind of shows that definitely, you can't like boil the ocean, and you've got to start a piece at a time. And gender is a really good one to start to help make our industry more diverse. We can go to the next slide. All right, then when to dig a little deeper, understanding the differences in the kind of responses that we got, when individuals were asked if they believed that discrimination exists in the music industry, 73% of women and 83% of non-binary individuals believe that discrimination does exist in the music industry, while only 39% of men believe the same. And so, like we just reviewed in some of the previous slides on the representation of leadership and that men predominantly are the ones in those roles. If men don't perceive that there is a problem and they're the ones in these roles, how do we drive change? Just because it isn't happening to you doesn't mean it isn't happening. And so I think that this is a really, really important stat to pull out. Because ultimately, this is where we have to constantly educate ourselves. Obviously, like we only have our own individual worldview and the things we've experienced, but we have to educate ourselves that we may not understand what others are going through, and we have to be like eternal students. And so this is a really, really important one if we want to drive change. It's closing that perception gap. If we can move to the next slide. So this is another one that was very shocking for me, and I do want to kind of, put a disclosure that this might be a sensitive topic for some who may have experienced abuse and sexual harassment in the past. But essentially, what we learned from the study again, we just reviewed who responded. 1 in 3 of the women that responded reported being sexually harassed or abused at work. So that is extremely high. And, for creators, like you think about it, what is their work? They're like in studios, they're at, in live performances, their work can be in these unconventional environments, and they should always be made to feel safe. And, I think that this is a really, really important stat, and might be a bit of a shocking one, but this is extremely high, that 1 in 3 of the women that responded in the survey reported being sexually harassed or abused at work. So going on to the next slide, which is I think a very important component of this as well, is that after this sexual harassment or abuse occurred, 31% of the claims were ignored or dismissed. 17% were told to keep quiet about it. Only 13% were able to report it to an authority. 7% felt supported by those that they reported it to. Okay, so 13% reported it, only about half of those then said felt supported. 7% were terminated afterwards. 6% were demoted afterwards, and 3% of there were resources that were available to them. So, if this is happening to 1 in 3 women, we've got to improve then what we're doing about this, because ultimately we've got to change these behaviors. So one, we've got to how do we stop this abuse and discrimination from happening? These may be some areas of focus that we need to improve on. We can go on to the next slide. All right, so then really glad that we also really wanted to cover in this data, in addition to gender, also sexual orientation. It was really, really important that we expanded. And the thing that's important to note is that when we asked if you believe that discrimination exists in the music industry, we also looked at that through the lens of gender as well as sexual orientation. And you can see that for the LGBTQ+ community, both on the discrimination based on their gender and then discrimination based on sexual orientation. It just skews much higher than the baseline of the total respondents. So, and you can see this also when you start looking into the study about any other point of difference. If you are a part of a racial ethnic minority, if you are, have any other point of difference, anything that you see from the respondents in feeling the discrimination, it is exponentially higher. It's like multiplying effect that you're experiencing at a higher, more elevated level. If we can move on to the next slide. And then we talked, Matt spoke really great about how important it was to get a global perspective. And I think that this one's really, really interesting, which is how did that global perspective actually translate a little bit differently in how the responses were. What you can actually see is that the belief that there is discrimination in the music industry skewed much higher in developed markets like North America and Europe versus in more developed, what we refer to as developing markets like Latin America, Africa, and Asia Pacific. I think that some of the reasons for these responses, and I think that really interesting discussions could be had here. One is, I think that these markets that are more in development are leaning more into digital. So they're kind of like creating music at home where maybe some of this discrimination isn't happening. Also, I think that there are also different perceptions of what discrimination is acceptable. So it's a combination of that. But nonetheless, the highest numbers are sitting in the developed markets. And, it just shows how much more we have to work because it's more ingrained in our culture that some of this is okay. And we have a lot of very deliberate work we have to do to make things better across North America and Europe. We can move on to the next slide. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the pay gap, and this is just essentially another data point that essentially there is a difference of what men and women are paid in the same role, and 53% agreed that men are paid more, essentially. And, again, we'll talk a little more about ideas and solutions around this, but also I think that there's just a lot of room to create more transparency, which is also reflected in these numbers around what pay should be for certain roles and certain roles of experience. And I know that there's some great laws, like in New York, you're actually required to, when you post a job, to actually show the ranges. This is an area that even companies can be more proactive to do if they want to, if they're very committed to paying, really not having a pay gap and paying everybody equally, fair for their level of experience and for the role, but being transparent about what that looks like. And that will go a long way potentially in helping bridge this. If we can move to the next slide. And then mental health. So this is one that came up very strong as an area that we really have a lot of work to do. And you can think about it if it really, really makes sense, because if you're in an environment where you are being discriminated against, where you are being harassed, where you are not getting the same access to resources and opportunities as your male counterparts, it is going to affect your mental health. And you can see in the respondents, both across women, transgender, and non-binary individuals, how much higher mental health skews for those groups and individuals. So this is is not mental health affect everybody, but you can see that this for individuals in the music industry and these groups, it just skews higher. We can go to the next slide. So then we didn't want to just talk about like what are the problems. We also wanted to talk about what could be part of the solutions. And we'll talk about this more in the discussions, but ultimately the respondents agreed that we should pay women and gender expansive employees equal salaries compared to their male counterparts, providing more resources, committing to the transparency for pay, providing networking opportunities, pledge to create an inclusive work environment and drive that with action. Don't just pledge it, but also do it. Provide mentorship opportunities, and then promote safe online space and spaces and advocate for accountability on social media. So these are just some of the top things that the respondents felt could be areas to start, and we'll talk more about this in other areas later in the discussion. If you can move to the next slide. Okay, and then this is something that really encouraged me, though, as much as we've just talked about a lot of things that, you know, are gaps and not good, the optimism about what is ahead to make the future of the music industry much more of an equal playing field is from very optimistic to somewhat optimistic, and the not optimistic and, you know, essentially like those that didn't have an opinion were much lower. So that's actually reason for hope that we're taking some good steps, and we just need to keep going. If we can move to the next slide. All right, and last but not least, who can make this change? And this is like from the respondents, who the respondents felt could actually drive impact, with executives being at the highest, followed by companies, major record labels, and then so on and so forth. So I think that's the last one, if I'm not correct. Yes, okay, and then this is one of my favorite quotes, and it is: the best way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. And we have the link to the full, both like the executive summary and the full study here. So it's just tunecore.com/be the change, which if you're not sure where to start to actually help be a part of this change, you can take some ideas there, and we're gonna actually talk about them right now. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrea. It's obviously a lot of detail, a lot of really great information in there. So I want to pull everyone else in from the panel. Christine, I want to pick on you first, because you're kind of a unique person in the music industry in that you're an American, but you've worked extensively in Europe in your career. So can you talk a little bit about the differences that you've seen in terms of you know, gender discrimination across the ocean and in the US?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting looking at Andrea's numbers. And one thing, you know, when we got to the slide where we talked about the UK numbers, I live in London. I lived in Stockholm before this, and even comparing the three countries I've lived in, things were wildly different. So one great thing is in the UK, they're required legally to, you know, show their gender pay gap numbers. It does not mean they're required to do anything about them. It just means they're required to show them. And so there are some perks, you know, there's some good upside there, but there is still, you know, obviously work to be done. And I think about the UK in general. The UK has a census that looks at, you know, across the country as a whole. They look at demographic information. In comparison, living in Sweden, they don't do that for race and ethnicity. So if you ask in Sweden, you know, hey, what is the demographic breakdown for race and ethnicity within the country? You wouldn't know. There was no way to find that out. And so that makes it really challenging for you to figure out, hey, what's the representation actually look like in a country like Sweden, for example. So long story short, things differ wildly, and I don't envy the research it takes to actually get these numbers, because even laws vary wildly, and there's certain things you can't even ask in certain countries, for example, which makes it really, really challenging. And I have worked in the music industry for over 15 years, and regarding discrimination, I promise you it happens across all the countries. So that's nothing new, but what we can do about it and what's being done about it, I think is what really differs. And there is optimism there, certainly.
Yeah, that's great. Alexandra, do you want to weigh in? I mean, you're an artist, so you have the ultimate artist perspective, which everybody always wants to hear about. So what's your experience been?
I think very early on, when I first got started, one of my biggest inspirations was listening to country radio in the car with my parents. It's the first time that I heard some of my favorite female artists that I still look up to today. And there were a lot more playing on the radio at that time. It's one of the biggest things when it's the conversation of gender equality comes up in country music. Country radio is not too far behind in that conversation. And I mean, just from 2000 to 2018, there was around a 66% decline in women on country radio. That's around 1 in every 3 songs that was played prior to that was by a woman, and now it's 1 in every 10. And so I think about myself as a young female artist coming up, growing up, listening to the radio, listening to Trisha Yearwood and Faith Hill and Martina McBride, and then listening now and hearing nothing but men. And I think about the young artists that are growing up and the lack of representation when it comes to females. And I think about myself and would I have ever really gone for this if I didn't see myself represented in those areas? And so that's what keeps me, that fire in my heart for this subject, and keeps me fighting for it. And yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of ego when it comes to the touring aspect of it all. When it comes to men opening for a female artist, we obviously all see the lack of female headliners when it comes to touring. I have definitely lost touring opportunities and being the headliner because there was a man with less hard ticket data that did not want to open for me as a female. So I've seen that firsthand. I've seen it in the writing room, all the way to, you know, men only communicating with men and me just being the idea machine in the corner that didn't really get a chance to kind of feel like I was even a part of the process, whether that song got cut or not. So a lot of things that I've experienced, and really, that's why I wanted to be a part of this. I just want to be a light for little girls who are coming up who don't see themselves properly represented, especially on country radio.
I think that's so important. You make such a good point about, you know, I mean, we always say that visibility is critical to people being able to see themselves, you know, doing something. And one thing I will say, I mean, I've talked about this with Andrea and other people before, is the number of women who run things in the music business now is exponentially higher than when I started in the music business 25 years ago. I mean, when I started in the music business, easily the only women you ever saw were publicists. For some reason, women were totally happy to start PR companies, which is still starting like a really important company. That's an important piece of the music business, but it felt like that was where the women were. And now I feel like women are so well distributed throughout, you know, the hierarchy. And what's interesting, you know, in the Be the Change study is it seems like there's a little bit of a glass ceiling still. When you look at those numbers, you know, it's like we have great representation at the third level, good representation at the second. And then once you get to the top, it's like, how come we can't bust right through to that top part? So obviously still a long way to go, but, you know, representation really matters. So that's really, really interesting what you said about country radio when you were growing up. And I feel like that's another thing where, you know, it's like the changes in the music industry that affect people are often things that happen for business reasons, but they still truly affect people. Because it made me think about when I was a kid, what I used to listen to on the radio, and it would be Duran Duran followed by, oh my God, the Rockabilly Band? What was the Rockabilly? Stray Cats, followed by the Pointer Sisters, right? And it was like, so in my mind, all those people were on the same level. Like that was the same, like that was success. I mean, when was the last time there was a Rockabilly Band in the top 10 on pop radio? You know, like, I mean, 1985 or whatever, obviously. Anyway, I digress, but yes, representation matters. I think that's a really great point. So continuing on, I mean, please jump in, panel, if you have anything you wanted to add on to that. Okay, Matt, I thought you might have something you wanted to drop in there. That's fine.
I did, but I've lost the thread in my mind. Alexandra was doing such a good job. I was just enraptured. So
yeah, what I'll say is I'm really glad to see like Music Week and Billboard do these, like, you know, they do the Billboard Women in Music events. You know, Music Week does the Women in Music in the fall. And I think that those things are really important to show, really, for what you just said, Alexandra, that, you know, you want to be able to see women that are like making really big impacts and are visible in the music industry. And, you know, I'm really excited Billboard does the same one for Pride, right? And so I think that these things are important because it will encourage more people to participate and show that this is an option for them. And so really excited to see that. We need to keep building on that.
Yeah, and I think I did remember it. Alexandra, when you were talking about being in the writer's room and just being excluded from conversations, that's something we asked about this year. Like, how have there been important conversations that you've been excluded from? And I don't have to tell you, surprise, surprise, women experience at a much higher rate. Anything to what Andrea was saying earlier, any intersectional identity you add on top to being a woman, a non-binary person, or a trans person, across every single question we ask, your experience and your disparity becomes even deeper. And
I
I
mean-
think, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Matt. I wanted to add there, just because of intersectionality, obviously, I always joke that I have lots of intersections. But in addition to that, one I'm actually sure if was studied is around immigration status. You can see this being a big issue right now, and how this intersects with everything else essentially is because, there's been a lot of layoffs, especially in the US at like big tech companies, which just kind of like flourished its way over the music companies because everything's so intertwined now. But having an H-1B1 visa and being in danger of losing your job, and also potentially being a single mother, for example, and also adding being a person of color, most likely because you're an immigrant, adding all these layers of stress and mental health and all of these issues that come into play that's so hard to kind of like separate from one another, but makes it like could be a potentially really toxic experience because if people know that the only reason why you're allowed to be in a country is because they've employed you, guess how they could potentially treat you, and that trickles down to so many things. Like if you're able to leave work early to go pick up your child, or if you can have a sick day or whatever it might be, and it becomes this really like potentially really toxic experience potentially.
You know what I was thinking about earlier when we were having when I was kind of working through that thought is it's very early on in my journey in the music business. I remember feeling an anxiety and a stress every time I would hear a new female break on country radio, which is such a toxic thought and feeling because it was still very early on in the conversation of women need to band together and we need to lift each other up. And it was almost this subconscious, because of what I was reading and what I was hearing and what I was maybe subconsciously noticing as I was listening to the radio, that shift in the 1 in 3 songs slowly becoming 1 in 10 songs by women, that all of a sudden there was this anxiety around it, that there were not enough spots for females to break in country music. And I remember feeling that. I mean, I'm talking probably, 10 years ago, very, very early on, feeling this anxiety of, well, someone else just broke and there's another spot gone. And just that narrowing, and feeling like there's just only maybe 2 spots left. It's just such a toxic thought. And I think that it does subconsciously pit women against each other, which is absolutely the last thing that we need to do, is to feel like we're all fighting each other for one little spot. We need to just make more spots.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think this is, I'm sorry, I'll let you go in 1 sec. I think what's really cool about the Be the Change study is that it measures people's perceptions. I think that's really important. That's like, that word is critical, because what you're talking about is exactly perception, right? So if you're looking at the same thing, which is slots on radio, women feel like that's a limited opportunity. Men feel like it's unlimited, right? Exact same stuff, but totally different perceptions. Sorry, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I really like that you brought that up, Alexandra, about the idea that we all have to lift each other up, right? It's like you make it up the ladder and you reach down and you help the next person up behind you. Because I think that's what it's going to take. And in any type of advocacy, whether it's in this industry or if it's for, civil liberties, which are constantly under attack for the queer community. And I think we all have to be really good advocates for each other because we're all in this together. One of the things that I found rather shocking about the study is that when we asked trans and non-binary folks about who was perpetrating discrimination against them, I was shocked to see how many people said cisgender white women.
Wow.
So again, it's, I think, not to use the P word, but patriarchy wins when it pits all of us against each other,
Yeah.
right? If they can keep us focused on fighting over the one spot, the only, Lil Nas gets to be the only gay singer who's on and the only gay person of color who's in the top 10, right? Or gets that support from a label. And we're all fighting over that spot instead of fighting the true, I don't want to call it enemy, but the true problem of overcoming that even mindset that that's an acceptable way for us to exist in the world. We're all in this together and we've got to fight for each other.
200%. Yeah. I had the incredible opportunity of being able to be recognized at the Billboard Women in Music Awards this year. And I was like, who can I bring with me? And essentially I was able to bring Alexander and another TuneCore artist, Jay Maya. I was like, I got him on the carpet. I was like, you need representation just like all those other major record label artists, and I need you there. And we have a responsibility on the executive side to be supporting our artists, and like who better to look out for female artists than the female executives. We've got to like lift as you climb and make those spaces. Like you said, like there wasn't a slot for that, but I made one. I was like, hey, I got a table, I'm bringing in my table, you're going to go rock the carpet because you should be on that carpet. And so we've got to make those spaces and make sure that that our as executives we are doing that part, because people pick up the phone for us. And so like definitely like use that for good things and use your voice. Don't let things slide. Speak up, because we have a responsibility. If we're in these roles, we have a responsibility.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead, Christine.
Just really wanted to add to that because again, I feel like I'm always talking about intersectionality because it becomes relevant in so many topics. But another area where I think executives play a really big part is around age. I think it was the third most discriminated against category when it was, structured. And the thing about the music industry that's incredibly frustrating is that it's age on both sides. Like there's like a sweet spot of 10 years where you're the perfect age to work in the music industry. And then after that, it's over. So you can be too young or you can be too old. And making sure that, when you're dropping that ladder down and lift people up, I think that's really important to the young people. So, if you look around at, conferences, or you look around at those red carpets, when you look, how many people are just most senior executives at the company, which tend to be white and male and cis and heterosexual. How many of those people get to walk the carpet versus how many of the young people, the young women that get to walk the carpet, the young people of color, the young queer folks that get to walk the carpet, or how many of them get to sit in the boardroom? How many of them are being, prepped to become the next executive? So if you're not starting really early to prep those people for that space on the carpet or that space in the boardroom, or ideally both, then you fall. Then this is what happens. And when people say, "Hey, what happened?" and they'll say the pipeline's a problem, it's because they didn't foster the pipeline. You can't say a pipeline's a problem if you're the person that's supposed to fill the pipeline.
That's right.
Yeah, I think this is where sometimes social science research gets problematic for people, right? Because when we talk about perception, people want to make it seem like it's not real. But I think this is exactly what we need to truly believe. Like I want to get into talking about white male allies and like what we can do to help our male allies fully embrace and come into this picture. And one of those things is they have to understand that this is real, right? And if their perception is not there yet, if they don't perceive it, we have to help them with that. I think we have to see that as an opportunity to help with that. And I also think, like, when we're talking about, when you have some power, help other people, lift as you climb. Another thing, though, is you absolutely have to not tolerate discrimination. Like, call it when you see it. If you have the power to stop it, stop it. Make changes within your organization to stop things. I mean, producers and engineers in studios are the easiest thing for us to talk about in the music industry, because that's literally a closed, dark room at night, bunch of men and maybe some young woman. I mean, that's like the most obvious sort of like predatory scenario. But a boardroom or an office or a break room can be a bad situation for somebody too. And I feel like it's really incumbent upon us to help change those opportunities for people.
Yeah, and let's talk about some actionable ways to do that. I mean, I think something I hear about from male counterparts is they want to be supportive, and often they're very good listeners, and it's so appreciated. But to your point, I think we have to not tolerate it and speak up. And I think if men are the ones in the majority of the leadership roles in the music industry, they have probably the strongest voice right now. And if you disagree with it, don't just listen, but speak up. We used to have in the subways in New York City, they would have that thing, like, if you see something, say something, like, I just spoke on this topic at South by last week, and I had this incredible, straight white male, come up to me afterwards and he's like, I want to be so supportive of this. You know, I'm a producer and I want to be a good ally. What can I do? And, you know, we just like talked a little bit and he mentioned to me, you know, just what he sees with the level of harassment that happens in the studios. And he gave me one example of like somebody that he, you know, he suggested some women to work with this other creator. And that creator's response, who was male, was, oh, she doesn't cut out, so I don't want to work with her. And so, you know, he essentially just was like, well, I don't work with that individual anymore. So we're gonna not support somebody who has that kind of belief system. I was like, that's exactly correct. You know, do it with your action, do it with where you put your money, do it with your voice and just say that's not okay. And like we in addition to the good listening ear, which is very appreciated, we also need to back that with investment, with you know, with speaking out, with if you have the ability to change policies to actually help with these topics, do it. You know, it needs to be vocal and action behind it. And you know, don't be afraid about saying the wrong thing. You know, you can't not talk about these topics because you're afraid you're gonna. I mean, initially when I started talking about this, I was like so careful with my words because I didn't want to offend anybody. And so I understand the fear of that, but it's really, really important to just, you know, if you believe in something and you don't think that this is right, use your voice, use your position to actually support it. And, you know, we need more male allies because this is how we're going to make the change. We all need to work on it together.
Yeah, and that's something we even saw in the results of the study. Like we asked people and over a third of men said, I'm afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. And there's a difference between calling out sexism, chauvinism, racism, bigotry, and hate, and educating someone who's coming to you with good intent, right? So like, absolutely, we should not tolerate any of the isms. But I think there are a lot of people out there who are willing to help, who are willing to, and I always tell people to focus on what they can control, right? You might be in a place where like you don't have the ability to set diverse hiring policies at your company. But you know what? If you're a manager and you're hiring for a team, use them anyway.
Yes.
It's fully within your right.
And I would add there just also, I mean, I've gotten to the point in my life, at least, where I am no longer trying to convince people that don't want to hear things. But the people that I am speaking to are the people that want to hear things. And so that's where the allies step in and they want to help, and giving them some of the language to help is really, really helpful, obviously. And what I mean by that is, you know, sometimes it's really exhausting to be a minority or whatever minority you are in a room and have to point out the same thing over and over again. So, you know, what I'll say, for example, I remember I'd be at work and I'd look at, you know, maybe the speaker lineup for an internal conference, and I'd be the only one to say, hey, by the way, there's no people of color on that at all. Or I'll be the only one to say, hey, by the way, there's the gender breakdown is really bad for that. And I was frustrated because I did it every single time. There were other people. There was, you know, we had a whole team of people, and no one else ever said anything. And that's the frustration that you run into, is then you look like the bad person because you're the one speaking up every time. You're the one causing trouble every time. And especially if you're in a situation where you don't feel comfortable speaking up, it can feel really isolating, and really, you know, really frustrating, really alone. So I call out every time. I call out people that I consider friends. I can call out companies that I love. And if I see a conference lineup, I would literally send an email like, hey, by the way, this conference lineup is a little disappointing. And I have no issue doing it because I know they'll probably invite me to speak anyway, and that's okay. But other people probably don't feel comfortable doing that. And so speak up for all the people that don't feel comfortable speaking up. And I think that's one of the easiest steps in allyship that people often fail to do.
And also, I feel like I mean, you can tell I took the opportunity to paint the trans pride on my face, living out loud and unapologetically. Right. I made a very serious concerted effort. I was like, no, people need to see people who look like me, who are willing to express their gender the way I do. And do it and not asking permission. Because honestly, it's an offense now to like in most places. But if you're a woman, be a woman. If you're a woman of color, be a woman of color. Don't apologize for it. And I know that is a big ask for a lot of people, in particular where you're not feeling safe. But if you do feel safe, and you have that power and that social capital where you are in the industry, use it, because no one else is going to do it for you.
Yeah, and use, I mean, to your point, but you know, if you're not necessarily the person without power in a situation, use the power you do have to make change. I mean, like Christine says, it's like, I don't think the only Black person on a panel should have to be the person who points out that she's the only Black person on a panel. You know what I mean? That's at some point, this is preposterous, right? Like oppressors cannot, you know, the oppressed cannot cure their own oppression. It's just not how it works.
Yeah, the number of times I've had to tell people me being half Middle Eastern doesn't count as diversity. Like that is the eggshell of diversity. We need someone actually of color on this panel.
Exactly. All right, well, you guys, we have like blasted through this. I could talk to you for hours and hours more, but there are a couple of questions if you guys would entertain a few questions. There's some really good questions, actually. So this one just says, how can we cooperate as women in the music industry and cross-cut all sectors? It's a big one, but I don't know, Chris, you're doing a bunch of stuff with She Said So, right?
Yeah, so I think if I'm interpreting the question correctly, in terms of like how do we kind of like coordinate together and how do we like coalesce together to support each other? Yes, I mean, I will shout out the organization that I work with called She Said So. It's a women and gender minority community focused on people within the music industry, and we work to represent, elevate, mentor, all kinds of things within that company. I will add, and we have 16 chapters all over the world, so we are trying to be as inclusive as possible. We have plenty of work to be done, but we are working on that, and I'm the UK director there. But I will add that there are organizations like that all over the world. There's Women in Control, Girls Irate, Women in Music. There's so many of them. Find one. If you're an organization that are saying, hey, I wonder why our gender diversity is so bad, and then you try to do an internal thing yourself, I highly recommend you just go talk to all these companies that would love your funding in order for them to do it for you, because they've been working in the space for sometimes decades. So I highly recommend that. And in terms of like really building your network, building your people, I always say about the music industry, it's so much nicer when you have a community, when you have your people, because it can be a really harsh place. And so if you find people that really care for you and really wants the best for you, I think that's the space where it feels a little bit less uncomfortable. I will shout out Key Change because of that. Key Change is focused on gender minorities. I think it's a lot per year in Europe and now in the US very shortly, which is very exciting. And the best part about it, I wasn't in Key Change, but I was in a similar program for Black executives and artists. The most exciting part about it is that I have a network of people that I know only want the best for me at all times. And the rarity of that in the music industry is quite high. And so just that alone, finding people that want the best for you and that you can bench to or support and can cheer, I think makes the world of difference.
What she said.
And if you're looking for resources, I'd like a huge round of applause to Andrea and TuneCore. We've listed out a bunch of those resources on the website in the same page as the full report.
And we've dropped links to some stuff in the chat, so you guys can go and go read back and find those links. I mean, we really only have a couple of seconds, but Alexandra, I wanted to bring you back in terms of how are you, like, what do you feel like artists can do? Because I feel like artists are often the people with the least power in these situations, but on the other hand, there are very powerful artists. So what do you suggest?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because I was going to kind of tie that into the last question, but I really think that, especially if there are any independent artists on here, that we all have a lot more, we have a lot more power in our careers. And so I think just making sure that you just take a look around your team, take a look around at the opportunities that you've created for yourself, especially whenever you're touring. If you're an independent artist who has built and built and built in a certain market, and you're at the position where you're putting 600 people in a room, then be cognizant of the people that you are putting in that support act slot. If you are the person that is drawing the tickets and you're not absolutely needing to bring another artist in that is just going to draw tickets, then put a female artist in that slot that you love, that is up and coming, that is trying to get their name out there. Put them in front of those 600 people. Put an artist of color in front of those 600 people that you love, that maybe doesn't have the largest following in the world, but give them that opportunity. I think the same with collaboration. When you're going and you're planning out your collaborations for the year, be cognizant of who you're putting in those positions. I think that we have a lot of opportunity in order to use what we've created and give opportunity to others and make as much change as we can, especially as in our team, as you start to build a team as well. Give those opportunities to people of color, give those opportunities to LGBTQ people, give those opportunities to women.
Honestly, I don't know that we could say it better than that. I agree. Give opportunities to pull people up with you. So I just want to thank my whole panel. You guys are fantastic. I want to thank Andrea from TuneCore for continuing to fund this amazing study, Luminate for doing the hard work. You guys are all fantastic, and everybody go and check out the entire report and pull each other up. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much.
everyone.
This was great.
Bye.
Bye.